Goodbye, Bones. My Basset Hound Bones was nobody's dog. Even though I had paid considerable money for him, he did not belong to me. He was a dog of the world, a bon vivant, an adventurer, an explorer, a dog about town. Basset Hounds have a proclivity for walking off and become, when the scent calls them, oblivious to any prior commitments or commands. They are born addicted to distant and exotically faint aromas, and Bones was no exception to the rule. For many years I attributed this penchant for wandering to his lustful nature, for Bones, I must confess, was the horniest dog in the United States of America. What caused this overstimulation was his ground to, as my 6-year-old son would say, wiener approximation. You see, it was not only Bones' ears that dragged along the terra firma. Bones had to step carefully when negotiating bumpy roads and was literally driven into ecstasy when running through fields of tall grass. He was such a beautiful puppy. Basset Hound puppies look a lot like Walt Disney's cartoon character Dumbo. They're all ears, and for the first 10 weeks of Bones' life, he couldn't walk without tripping over them. I used to carry him everywhere to keep him from making those incredible three-point landings. He grew into a huge dog, big of voice, chest, and paws. In his prime, he weighed close to 75 pounds and was considered by connoisseurs of the breed a super specimen. He had the right coloring, the sad eyes, the drooping jaws. I always thought that he looked like the old character actor Charles Laughton. At times he seemed stodgy in English, but his looks belied his lust for life, his need to be running through the woods. Yet it was this need to wander and follow scent that finally drove us apart. We loved each other, but we were far from best friends. The dog was simply too much work and a royal pain in the glutamus maximus. In his youth, our house was perfect for Bones. Our backyard borders on Fairmount Park and sits directly west and above the Valley Green. So for the first 5 or 6 years of his life, whenever I opened the door, he would take off and follow the back trails through the woods to ultimately lay in front of the Valley Green Inn. He was well known there. The owner loved him. The chef created scraps de la Bones in his honor. The customers showered him with pats and tidbits. He strolled the terrace, accepting scraps of food like a maitre d' accepting gratuities. In the winter, he would trek through the snow to lie in front of the inn's roaring fire. He was a conversation piece, and the inn enjoyed having him there. And when they closed at 10, they would simply tell him to go home. And after making his usual rounds, a couple of other cafes like the Chestnut Grill or Towie's, and maybe a late-night visit to a female friend, he would come back to our house at 4 or 5 in the morning and wake me up by barking so that I should let him in. I tell you, this dog had a great life. Now, 3 distinctive qualities set him apart from all other dogs. First of all, he was the only dog in the United States who knew how to make a telephone call. At least 25 times a year, after a hard night's work at the inn, when he was much too exhausted to climb the hill to our house, he would go to the payphone next to the inn and bark. And with his tail wagging, he would continue to bark until someone paid attention to him, looked at his tag, and called me. "Sir, do you have a dog named Bones?" "Yes. Are you at the payphone next to the Valley Green Inn?" Why, yes, sir." "I'll be there in 5 minutes." I'd go right down and pick him up because it was a way to get him home early. The second thing that set him apart was, I must admit, truly fascinating. Extremely beautiful women found him irresistible. Before calling me, they would take him home, allow him to lie on their sofas, scratch his belly, and feed him bonbons. Is it any wonder he didn't want to be with me? And finally, Bones loved to ride shotgun. If you open your car door, he would jump right in. And every time he jumped right in, he would disappear for a couple of days. And when that happened, my young son would ask, "Is Bones lost, Dad?" No, boy. Basset hounds can never get lost. If you leave them alone, they can always find their way back. But if you drive them off in a car, they become disoriented. They can't retreat because they can no longer find that familiar scent. Does that mean Bones is lost, Dad? No, son, he's not lost. He just doesn't know where he is. Oh. To stop all that repetitive dialogue, I created a huge tag. It was at least 7 or 8 times as big as any normal tag, and it read, Bones. I am not lost. I know my way home. Don't feed me or take me away. And then the telephone number. This humongous tag was ignored as though it didn't exist. Sir, I have your dog here. And where is that, I would say impatiently? Cape May, New Jersey. Cape May, New Jersey? Yes, sir. We found him 3 nights ago when we were visiting that Valley Green Park up there in Chestnut Hill. Sir, if you were visiting the zoo, would you take home the elephant? Huh? Did you read the words on the tag? What words? The words right above the telephone number you called, you imbecile. Look at the tag. Well, I'll be. It says right here he ain't lost. How about that? Should I put him on the highway then? No. He's lost now. I'll come pick him up. Give me the directions. And my boy would ask, does Bones know where he is, Dad? And my wife would say, I was almost getting ready to say goodbye, Bones. Bones just doesn't know where he is, Mom. That's the problem. Bones did this to me on the average of 5 or 6 times a year. Isn't it funny, my wife would say, how long it takes for these Good Samaritans to become Good Samaritans? I bet they wouldn't have picked him up if he were a Doberman. Why else would they have waited so long to call? They're returning him for one reason and one reason only. He's Bones. Could you imagine trying to keep him in last night? That must have been holy hell. Do you want company, hon? Don't get into any fights. Don't call the guy an asshole. If you're not back by morning, I'll call the authorities. Most of the time, the people who took Bones had only good intentions. But once he was actually dog-napped and held for ransom. I guess the call came in around 7 o'clock at night, and the voice was young in Spanish. Hey, man, I got your dog here, man. I want the reward. The reward? I questioned. That's right. How much you going to pay me to bring him back? No, I said. The question is, how much are you going to pay me to bring him back? Hey, man, don't play games. I seen this dog on TV, and I know he's worth money. Actually, Bones had, in his own inimitable way, attained a bit of notoriety. My wife had entered him in the first ever Philadelphia Silly Dog Contest, and he won. His prize was 4 free tickets to a Phillies game and an opportunity to dance on the field with the Philly Fanatic in front of 30,000 screaming fans. The tune to which they danced I thought was extremely appropriate. The Fanatic picked, "You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog." The crowd cheered, and Bones responded with a few mighty howls. This dog has never been on TV, man, I lied. You lying! This dog's in every commercial on the tube. You got the wrong dog, I insisted. The dog napper hung up. But he called back the following day. I'm letting this crazy dog loose on Girard Avenue, man. Listen, I said, don't let him go. I'll give you a reward. Give me your address and I'll come right down and pick him up. Just hold him until I get there. He'll get killed if you let him loose. I was more concerned with the pit bulls attacking him than the traffic. It wasn't that Bones couldn't defend himself, but Bones, like Ferdinand the Bull, was more content to smell the flowers than fight in the arena. He was a flower child who loved the smell of scented trees, the much-sprayed fire hydrant. Ethan Girard was totally out of his element. It was the summer, and the population of Ethan Girard was outside sitting on the stoops. Here kids were playing in the street. People were playing checkers and talking to each other. I did not belong. But all that changed when I got out of my car and yelled, "Who's got my damn dog?" Instantaneously, their initial suspicion and looks of disdain vanished. replaced by broad smiles. "Is that your crazy dog, man? The one with the big ears and the big dick?" "Yeah, that's him," I confessed. "Hey, man, I feel sorry for you, man. That son of a bitch, he can really sing the blues." And it went on like that until the dog napper was summoned and he appeared with Bones. I gave the kid $5 and was cheered by the neighborhood as we got in the car and drove off. Bones was happy to see me that day. There had been plenty of times that he could have cared less about my showing up. But that day, down at 8th and Girard, it was different. For the first time, I thought he realized how lucky he was. On the way home, he licked my face as if to tell me he knew what an amazing life I had allowed him to lead. "We got to stop meeting this way, Bones," I said as we drove away. This time I felt each lick was a stroke of repentance. Something in his eyes told me, at last, he had reformed. And for about a month, he tried. He stayed around the house, he played with the kids, but the narcotic of the woods and the aromas of the inn and the accolades of his many fans were too much for him, and one lovely Sunday morning, he decided to visit his old haunt. It was to be his undoing. That auspicious summer day, they were having a wedding at the inn. They had placed chairs on the green. The ushers and bridesmaids had formed an aisle along a red carpet leading up to the front steps. The pastor was waiting on the front steps for the couple to deliver their final I-do's when Bones arrived on the scene. He skillfully made his way around the 100 or so guests and up the red carpet and promptly sat between the bride and the groom. He looked up at the preacher and the couple and barked twice as if to say, "I'm ready," and waited. Those in attendance roared with delight. The bride and groom thought it was natural and wonderfully woodsy. The cameraman caught the moment forever. He caught Bones as the couple took their final vows, as he walked with the couple down the red carpet aisle and afterwards at the party. It couldn't have been better if it were planned. Bones was the talk of the party. Everyone wanted to pose with the Basset. Everyone loved the idea. Everyone, that is, except the bride's father. He was not at all happy. Throughout the event, he maintained his composure, but inside he seethed. In his mind, Bones had turned what would have been a glorious and dignified affair into a debacle, a carnival. Unfortunately for Bones, the bride's father sat on the board of directors of the park and had a lot to say about what went on in and around the inn. Using pictures of what had occurred, he was able to influence the board to pass a leash law for the area around the inn. The law is known as the Bones Law. Up to a $300 fine was to be the penalty for any dog caught off leash. The news came to me by way of a $100 ticket. Now, it so happened that at that precise time in my life, I owned a building in the Fairmount section of the city, and the area was having trouble handling the incredible influx of drug dealers. Several of these hoodlums had selected the front of my building, a corner property, to transact their business. It began to scare my female tenants. "Look," I pleaded with the captain of the 9th District, "can't we do something? This is killing me. My tenants are scared shitless. Can't you park a car down there for a couple of nights? Can't you make an arrest?" He told me he would try to do something and suggested that I stay by the phone that night just in case he needed me to press charges. About 11:30 that evening, I got a call from the police. But the call was not about crack dealers on Fairmount Avenue. No, this communication concerned a far worse public enemy, the notorious Bones. The culprit was down there resting on the steps of the Valley Green Inn, and he did not come under the protection of the First Amendment. "Come on down here and get this dog and your ticket." It was the voice of Sergeant Stitzer, The diligent cop who had given Bones his first ticket and who was now hounding the Basset like a true Inspector Javert. Damn if Bones was going to rest his weary bones on the steps of the inn. I can't come down now, Sergeant. I'm in the middle of an emergency. Wrap the ticket in his collar and send him home. If you're not down here in 5 minutes, I'm taking this dog down to Fifth and Erie. Fifth and Erie? That's right, the SPCA. And then I'll be coming to your house to give you your damn ticket. Stitzer, it's a good hour drive to Fifth and Erie. That's an hour down, an hour back, and an hour there. That's 3 hours out of your day to arrest a dog. Stitzer was silent, thinking about the absurdity of the ordeal. Stitzer, could you do me a favor? On the way down, could you pick up a couple of drug dealers hanging out on Fairmount Avenue? It was at that moment I decided to say goodbye to Bones. I loved him with all my heart, but I could no longer afford him. I gathered the family together and told them of my decision. I suggested that we go down the Valley Green and say goodbye to Bones before Stitzer hauled him away. It was 2 days before Christmas, and it had snowed. Still, we made it down to the inn in about 5 minutes. Except for Stitzer and Bones, the place was totally deserted. Who had the dog been bothering? When we arrived at the scene of the crime, it was a standoff. The fugitive simply did not want to go to Fifth and Erie. He was no dummy. He had already been to 8th and Girard and knew by the way he was being hustled and talked to that Fifth and Erie would not be any better. Stitzer was attempting to lift the huge dog into the back of a paddy wagon. The officer would have had better success trying to direct the placement of a huge rolled-up carpet. Like the carpet, Bones sagged in the middle. Stitzer's stomach, almost as large as Bones' ears, was getting in the way, and he was struggling. This was not a one-man job, and he seemed rather relieved to see us. But his expression changed when we told him our mission was not one of retrieval, but one of farewell. No, we're just here to say goodbye. We love the scoundrel, but we can no longer afford the tickets. One by one, we bravely said our goodbyes. But my son, only 7, couldn't contain himself and started to blubber. His jaws started to quiver and tears started to flow. It was then that I realized that he wasn't the only one crying. Stitzer was also blubbering. The big cop was slobbering like a kid who had lost his pacifier. I don't want to take your dog, he exclaimed with tears running down his cheeks. It's Christmas. I just want to give you the ticket. Here, after years of running and traveling to bring Bones back, we had finally made the gutsy and traumatic decision to let him go, and Stitzer has to go sentimental. We took Bones home, promising never to let him run again, and we didn't. I believe it's the thing that killed him. For once you've tasted freedom, it's hard to live without it. The long daily walks we took together never seemed enough. He always seemed to be churning inside. And a year later, he developed a stomach tumor and he died on the operating table. The night before the operation, the family went to the veterinary hospital and spent an hour with him, saying our last and final goodbyes. We buried him in the backyard. We put him in a cardboard box and lowered him into a deep hole we had spent the afternoon digging. It was a good sunny spot for him, close to the trail he often took to get to the inn. He's not lost now, is he, Dad? My son asked. The sun had begun to set above the trees. No, I said, taking his hand as we walked back to the house. Now he knows exactly where he is.